Right now, joining us on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline, ESPN NFL prognosticator. Follow him on Twitter at Mike Clay NFL, and make sure you get that ESPN Plus subscription so you can check out all of his insider work on ESPN Plus. Mike Clay joins us on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Mike, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing well. Man, we're on Saturday of week 8. I can't believe we're halfway through, almost halfway through the NFL season. It just flies by every single year.
I know. You feel like, where did the time go? Like, you want it to come so much, and then when it gets here, you're like, where's it going? It's week 8. It's week 10.
Yeah, exactly. And I think especially since they put the Thursday games in, it's just constantly, football. There's news, there's injuries, there's games, and then it's gone. Within a few months, it's Christmas time, and it's over. So let's enjoy it while it's here.
Exactly. So at this point in the season, Mike, I want to know from you, what is there a team? Is there a storyline? Is there a player? Is there something that's happened so far in the first several weeks of this season that has really stood out to you in terms of maybe something that didn't go as you expected, exceeded your expectation? What is something that stands out for you?
Well, I think the top NFL that's not really being discussed is probably the fact that road teams have won more games than home teams. I an interesting development. You've seen across the league over the past, for decades, that basically the home team had about a 3-point edge. That's what you saw, and sports books moved the lines. If you ran point totals for home teams against road teams, it was always right around 3 points, and that varied based on who the team was, whether it was Seattle, who has a great home field advantage, or a team like Kansas City, who does not, believe it or not, even though that's a loud stadium, they actually do not really have one. But this year, we're seeing road teams week after week just beat the home teams, and you're wondering, what is it? Why is the home field advantage disappeared? It's been dwindling. It's just taken a sharp dive the other direction. A lot of home field advantage in sports is related to essentially referee bias, just that the feeling of the crowd and making calls that benefit them. Maybe all of the confusion with the penalties and reviews has kind of washed that away, but something I'm going to be keeping a close eye on is if that kind of regresses to the mean in the second half, do we see home teams get back on track? Because that's huge, whether it's making decisions for fantasy or gambling or picking games in a water cooler league at work, and you just picking games, and if it's close, you pick the home team. That has not existed this year. So it's big for so many reasons. I'm really curious to see how it plays out. And it's, even in the playoffs as well, it means so much. How much does home field advantage matter? So that's what I'll be monitoring.
Interesting tidbit there. Mike Clay joining us, the Boardwalk Honda Hotline on 97.3 ESPN. Mike, I got to touch with you because you tweeted out yourself, and this has got to be the tweet of the week right here. I'm giving you a little credit here. So the Orlando Scandrick news has been the hot thing down here, and you tweeted out, Scandrick is the guy without children who tells parents how to raise their kids. Mike, tell me how you really feel about this story.
Yeah, listen, it's all in fun nature. We're just talking about having fun here. But, it was kind of silly. The team a few weeks, and then he knows everything about what's going on in the locker room and has strong opinions. And then you see the videos of him saying so many nice things about the team after his last game and to Malcolm Jenkins. And then he turns around and opposite. So who do we believe? Which are telling the truth? What's going on in that locker room? But yeah, it was just, again, we're just talking about sports. It's good natured, but I thought that was kind of silly. And look, we've seen drama in locker rooms like this many times. Think about the Vikings just 3 weeks ago. They were falling apart. It was a disaster. Get rid of everybody. Kirk Cousins is a bust. And then the next week, everything's fine. Suddenly, Kirk Cousins leads the NFL in passer rating. And, Stephon Diggs is a better yards per target than Tyler Lockett did last year when he led the NFL and was just putting up ridiculous efficiency numbers, and everything's suddenly fine in Minnesota. That can be the case for Philadelphia, too. Injuries have been a big reason for their problems this year, especially if you look at the interior defensive line, and obviously cornerback play has been a problem for a while. But they have a lot of raw talent on that roster. I think they could turn it around. And maybe that happens this week with the trip to Buffalo. It could be a statement game against a team that has had a very light schedule, but only has one loss. They're playing pretty good football, especially defensively. So the season isn't over. The Eagles have one of the easiest remaining schedules. I think getting some of that drama out of the locker room, airing out some of the concerns is probably a good thing, and now they can focus on football and win some games. So still plenty of hope for this team here in 2019.
What has been the bigger shortcoming in your mind for the Eagles? Has it been on the offensive side or the defensive side?
I think it has to be defensive. I mean, they're in the top 10 in terms of touchdowns allowed. And again, I do cornerback, including Orlando Scandrick and guys like Ryan Lewis, just as many bodies as they can get at those positions. He plays them down a little bit. The offensive line injuries have been terrible. Guys, just dropping constantly. It's been so. I think they're going to be busy here in the next week at the deadline. We'll see what they do, but if the offense they can defensive offense in the NFL, but certainly defense has been the larger issue.
We know that a couple of years ago, the Eagles, they were one of the leaders in the NFL in receivers in terms of drops per target. They've had a lot of drops as well this year. Do you think that is the players themselves? Do you think that might be a focus issue? Do you think that might be a system issue? Because we saw the drops a few years ago, and now we're seeing the issue crop up again this year.
Yeah, it's definitely a red flag. This is not what we expected, right? I mean, we thought this might have been the best skill position group they've had in a long time. After added side in the draft with Dallas Goedert in his second season, bringing in Deshaun Jackson, who obviously has only played one game, but it's really disappointing for sure. But as they continue to develop Goedert and you get Deshaun Jackson back, that should open up fewer doubles, a little bit more juice out of the running game, and maybe Arcega-Whiteside develops a little bit so you can get a few flash plays out of him, and obviously Deshaun as a deep threat. Maybe they make a trade. Could it be Robbie Anderson in the coming days? I mean, there's a lot they could still do to get going in the right direction. But, yeah, the drops have been problematic. The good news is there's a few of the guys like Ertz, for example, that, are reliable. He's had some drops, fine, but it's fixable. Whereas, maybe like a Mac Hollins, you're not as optimistic about, or Nelson Aguilar, not as optimistic about. I'm sure he's playing out the rest of his Eagles career here. I can't imagine he'll be back next season with guys they have on this roster. So, I think for at least, say, 50% of the drop issues, I think it's fixable moving forward. And once Deshaun gets back on the thing.
Mike Clay joining us on the World Wakanda Hotline here on 97.3 ESPN. You can follow him on Twitter at Mike Clay NFL. Mike, NFC big picture, is it fair to say that right now it's the Saints and everybody else in the NFC?
Well, I think so. I mean, San Francisco's right there, obviously. I think New Orleans is the better team. I felt that the Saints were the best team in the league last year, and obviously they were one play away from going to the Super Bowl and perhaps winning it, but sometimes the breaks just don't go your way. And they're not scoring points nearly as often as they were with Drew Brees, and they're still winning, still winning games because of a terrific defense, just an all-around really good football team, and when Brees comes back, sky is the limit for them. So I think right now the Saints are the favorite. Honestly, I mean, the Patriots are obviously right there, the best teams in the NFL right now. Patriots defense holds up once they play a schedule here. It's going to get a lot tougher over the next couple of months, but right now, unfortunately, the Eagles are on the outside looking in. I think that's obvious, but they're right there. I mean, they're within range of winning the division if they turn this around, and obviously the wild card's going to be tough. Honestly, I don't think the NFC East is going to send two teams, because you think about the NFC North with the Packers, the Vikings, the Bears, and the Lions, and of course the West as well as the Rams and Seahawks chasing the 49ers. So there's a lot of people a lot of teams in the NFC competing for only 6 spots. It's going to be tough, but the Eagles still have a shot to take the NFC East and make a run at it.
Speaking of the NFC South, the Falcons, and we talk about a team that's totally fallen below expectations. I'm not 100% sure though, Mike. Is it just the coach? Because it feels like there's got to be something else going on with that team. I mean, they traded Sanu. They came into this season with expectations, and they're not just not hitting those expectations. They're just playing poor football at times. There's
no doubt about it, and the offense is fine. I mean, you just mentioned the Saints. I mean, this team reminds me of the Saints a few years ago, where Drew Brees was just carrying them to 500 records every year, but they couldn't get over the hump because they were giving up a ton of points with historically bad defense, and that is what we are seeing from the Falcons right now. And look, you could say, well, they've had injuries too, Not really. Keanu O'Neal's a huge one for sure, but otherwise, what am I missing? I mean, the core, the guys you put in place are there. I mean, Desmond Trufant's missed a few weeks, but he was struggling the first month of the season. So I don't think that's the excuse this year where it was last year. The defense has been a massive disappointment. It's really unfortunate because Dan Quinn, a good defensive mind, obviously came from Seattle, had been pointed in the right direction, and the wheels have just fallen off the season. So it just hasn't worked out. Again, offense, not the problem. They've invested a little in the offensive line. That's trending the right direction. Matt Ryan is one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. He has played extremely well this season when he's been healthy. It's just the defensive side of the ball has put way too much pressure on the offense to score. Only so much you can do. So at the end of the day, they have to fix that defense somehow, whether it's coaching changes, personnel, and it might be a while. Honestly, they might be picking in the top 5 next year because they are a horrible cap situation. It's unbelievable what kind of are this offseason. I'm not sure if they can fix this anytime soon.
Mike, one more before I let you go. I always appreciate your time here on 97.3 ESPN. As people may know, you're also you're on the Fantasy Football Now. You're on Fantasy Show with Matthew Berry, all these different platforms talking fantasy football. And I want to know, the conversation with you guys as well as in this area this week, fantasy-wise, has been about Zach Ertz and about tight ends. And I want to know from you, where is the value at this point with the tight end position? It feels like between the injuries and between the underwhelming players like Zach Ertz, production-wise, the fantasy football, when it comes to tight end, that seems to be a position of need for a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, right now there's a tier of 8. I mean, if you recall, those who played fantasy, going into the season, it was Ertz, Kelsey, and Kittle, and if you didn't a while, but now it's kind of George Kittle, Travis Kelsey, Austin Hooper, Mark Andrews, Hunter Henry, Evan Ingram, and of course Zach Ertz. If you have any of those guys, you're feeling pretty good on a week-to-week basis. If you don't, you're probably at a little bit of a disadvantage and looking for value plays like Gerald Everett. Maybe you throw a dart at a T.J. Hawkinson, who started strong, has kind of leveled off. Chris Herndon will be back for the Jets here in a couple of weeks. Jimmy Graham has actually been better than expected. But that's it. Maybe Jared Cook's back on track once Drew Brees is in there and he gets healthy. So, I think the position actually overall has been a little better than in years past because injuries usually just destroy. And again, we've had a few breakout players like Andrews and Waller. So, the state, honestly, it's weird to say this in week 8 because usually we're panicking at the tight end position about this time of year because of all the injuries. But right now, the state of the position is pretty good.